Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 26 of the Fair Housing Insiders. And today we are talking about fair housing, how it relates to corporate social responsibility, but even more important, how it relates to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we have a very special guest on our show today. So stay tuned, deep topic, and how all of us can show our support, and not only by words but by actions in what we do. So it's going to be a great conversation to how to connect those two, fair housing and DEI. So before we get into our conversation, I'd love to welcome our guest Jen Picotti from Swift Bunny. Jen, how are you? You're the Chief Learning Officer. So thankful to have you with us here today.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It is so great to be a part of this whole program and to be talking about this topic that it's so important to, I know to you, it's important to me, but it's really important and critical in our industry right now. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, great to have you. I can't wait to hear some of your insights and how they relate. Now, Swift Bunny, just so our audience knows, can you just give us a little idea of what Swift Bunny does and how it's going to relate to some of the trends and stats that you're going to be sharing with us today?
Yes, so Swift Bunny is multifamily's only employee engagement focused platform. So we help companies understand what's working well for their employees, what's not working, and how to make their overall experience better so that they can serve their clients, their residents more efficiently and more effectively. So we've got a lot of great stats on what we're hearing with in the trends from um, employee engagement, employee turnover, employee learning trends, all kinds of good stuff like that. And one of the key things that we have done this year, the past 12 months, is a multifamily diversity, equity, and inclusion study to find out what the experience is within our own industry. So, got a lot of great stats on that to share with you today, too.
Perfect. Yeah, we're going to dive into those. And for our audience, whether you're multifamily, senior housing, student housing, affordable housing, the principle behind these stats will definitely resonate with you. So what this show and this episode in particular is really going to focus on is, we talk about fair housing. That's what this show is all about. Fair housing, best practices, and often we can easily get into the rut of it's just that check the box item, and it's just something that we know we want our team to be in compliance with. But this episode in particular is really going to help all of us just open our eyes to the bigger picture. Like, what's our culture? Do we live the Fair Housing Act in, and how it relates to a very important topic and always has been, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So can't wait to dive in. So Jen, yeah, let's jump into that. What are some trends, some stats that you guys have calculated and curated, and give us a lowdown on them?
Absolutely. So I think that one of the most important things for us to understand as far as why we need to focus attention on this, and I know we've talked a lot about corporate social responsibility, you and I, in the past, and one of the things that's coming out that's related to that are ESG metrics. And
Mm-hmm.
that has to do with environmental, social, and governance metrics. And uh, we often see CSR and ESG used interchangeably. We're seeing more on the ESG side because investors that are looking at property management companies, owners who are thinking about hiring on third party property management companies, they're looking at these metrics to decide who they're going to choose, who they're going to invest with. And, and so property managers and operators, they need to be very thoughtful, very mindful of how they are managing these metrics. So some of these metrics include the social side of things, and that has to do with how you're treating your employees, how you're treating your residents, um, And one of the things that we looked at from an industry perspective is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there were a lot of bright spots that we saw, that we as an industry and that the participating companies can feel very, very good about, very strong about. One of those things was that, when it comes to an inclusive environment, creating an inclusive environment, we saw that over 82% of respondents, and these are multifamily employees, whether they're property managers, maintenance supervisors, technicians, leasing agents, et cetera, 82% said that they agree that their supervisor creates a very inclusive environment. And that's important because when you're going to work every day, you want to feel like I belong here.
Right.
My team looks at me and they say you belong here. So that was a really strong showing within this particular survey. So I was really excited to see that. Another thing that I thought was really important is that we saw that 80% of respondents agreed that their company is committed to diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So that was a really good thing to see. 4 out of 5 employees is saying, yeah, my company is focused on this. They say that it's important. They're doing things specifically to support those types of initiatives. But it was also interesting to see that the remaining 20%, what was going on there? So 15%, when it comes to the company is committed to diversity and inclusion, 15% were right in the middle. They weren't willing to commit whether they agree or disagree. They were in this neutral zone, which to me was very telling, because it either means like they weren't sure, maybe they haven't heard about anything, or maybe they were unwilling to commit to one side or the other, which is just as concerning, maybe even more so. So there's opportunity for companies to be more vocal, to be more clear, to be more decisive on, here is our position on diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is the type of culture and environment we want to create for our employees. And I think the more that you can be clear and state, this is where we stand on this topic, the more supported your employees feel. But it also sets the tone, because when we're talking about fair housing and we're looking at what the expectation is with our employees on how they interact with every resident, how they evaluate applications that are coming in, everything that they're doing on a daily basis. If they're not coming from an environment that's treating the employees equitably and fairly, it's very difficult to assume that our employees are going to go out and treat the residents equitably and fairly.
Right. I love how you kind of pulled a lot of things together just in a few stats there. So, as you were talking, it's like I was reflecting back on potential silos. So you mentioned, what was it? Is it ESG? Is that the acronym?
Yes.
ESG.
Environment, social, and governance. Yes.
Environment, social, and governance. So, typically that may be something like you mentioned, investors are looking at, and then we get to where fair housing is, and that may be something that's the training department, or that's the learning and development department. And then we have leadership that is branched off. So from what I could surmise from your stats, like, these can't act as silos. Like, we can't have someone who's just focused on ESG and then this department, well, that's your responsibility. Compliance, that's for you to worry about. So is that a fair assessment? Like, really, from a corporate standpoint, from a corporate social responsibility standpoint, there has to be a meeting of the minds, right? Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. It's not just one department or one executive's job to focus on this type of thing, because it is a mindset, it is a culture, it is an environment that's being created across a wide variety of individuals, a wide variety of people. And so if we're not all thinking about it, if we're not all aware of it, if we're not all operating under the same set of expectations, it's going to be choppy. It's going to be a different experience across the board. And we can't, from a risk factor, we can't afford to do that.
Right.
But also just from a functionality perspective, we need people to feel that they are supported, that they're taken care of, that they have the tools and resources they need, and that they're in an environment where they're able to thrive. Because it's really difficult for anyone to go into a work environment where they feel that people are kind of expecting them to fail or almost rooting for them to fail for whatever reason. And that same kind of thing can happen from a resident's perspective, where every time they interact with a staff member, they're being expected to fail, or they're being expected to be annoying, or whatever it might be. So we have to create this solid foundation of everyone needs to feel that they're being treated fairly, they're being treated equitably. There is a level of respect that everyone can just function on. And that's every single person, every single department's job. We can't afford it to be silos and say, oh, that's their job, that's their role, that's their responsibility. It's like, no, it's everyone's responsibility.
Right. Fair Housing Institute, we say it's a way to be, not just a thing to do. It should be something that's way more encompassing across the board. And it makes me think, not to get too medical, but I think a lot of us are familiar with the term like muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
So from a fair housing standpoint, if it's just a once a year thing where you take a course and that's it, that's really not all, it's not a solid impression. And we share this on our show all the time. There are so many avenues to talk about fair housing besides training. There's role playing, there's doing scenarios, there's acting out different situations. There's just like a lot of different aspects to it. And I think this really lends to that also. If a company if it has that culture, then wouldn't you agree that just adds to that muscle memory? Oh yes, my company, they take the lead in equality, they take the lead in inclusion and diversity. So that's like it's there. And so that just helps for when you're performing your job function, for that to be much more automatic. What do you think of that thought, Jen?
I totally agree. It's like my 9-year-old told me last night as I was putting her to bed, "Oh, Mom, my class has to run the mile tomorrow." And I said, "Oh, well, have you been practicing? Have you been doing a lot of running at school?" "No." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So if you haven't been running every day and suddenly you have to run the mile, it's going to be tough. It's going to be hard, and you might not do very well, but you can try, but it's not going to be as easy as if you were doing a little bit of running every day or every week. So I think you're exactly right. That muscle memory of it has to be incorporated into a little bit of every day, of the words that we're using, the point of view that we're providing in different conversations or interactions. But it's I think of things like sometimes we don't connect all of the dots. And I think it's important to realize that everything we do from an organizational perspective matters, and it influences how we treat other people, how we interact with other people, whether internally or externally. And one of those things that came out in the diversity and inclusion survey was it had to do with job opportunities, and job opportunities being promoted to every employee, not just this perception of job opportunities being offered to certain employees. So when we asked this question under the umbrella of equal treatment, and we said, okay, our job opportunities promoted to all employees, we only had about 2/3, around 2/3 that said that they agreed that the job opportunities were offered to everybody. And whether this is a perception or whether this is actuality, I think this is a key point of view, because one thing that we heard over and over from the survey is I really need to see someone in leadership that looks like me. And whether we're talking about more women in leadership positions, more people of color in leadership positions, I don't know what's possible, or I'm not as likely to know what's possible if I don't see people that look like me, that come from my background, that whatever, in leadership positions. And so this perception of the higher up jobs, you know, management, executive leadership, the C-suite, um, if I don't see those opportunities being presented to the company as a whole,
Mhm.
and I just perceive that the company's going out and cherry picking people that maybe look or act or think the way the current executive leadership looks like and thinks and acts like, um, then I might feel that the opportunities are limited for someone like me. So just something like that, making sure that every job opportunity is put out there for every single employee in your organization to have access to and to throw their hat in the ring. And even if they don't throw their hat in the ring, it might spark some really valuable conversations with their supervisor to say, hey, that looks really interesting to me. What do I need to do to be ready the next time an opportunity like that opens up? And the other thing I think companies need to be aware of is, yes, promote those job opportunities to every employee. It doesn't mean you're guaranteeing you're going to promote from within. You're not saying that, you're not promising that, but by at least making everyone aware, you may tap into some strengths, some experience within your own team that you weren't even aware of. They just haven't had the opportunity to let you know, hey, yeah, I know how to do that. I have expertise in that area. So that's one example of just creating an environment that might not be overtly pointing to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but what it's doing is creating an environment where everyone is welcome. Everyone gets to participate in the conversation equally and fairly. And I think that's something that we just need to, from that muscle memory point of view, we need to flex that muscle. We need to
Yeah.
exercise that muscle every day.
Yeah. 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 Fantastic. Yeah. So I mean, what a great overall picture like we're painting here. And to your point, it is such a huge picture. We've got new talent coming into our industry. This is such a big topic. Not that it's not important to all of us or any of us, but because it is much more center stage right now, and we have uh, college graduates who are coming into our industry, it is very much top of mind. So they are going to be looking at all of those aspects within a company. And so that's kudos to our industry, though. I gotta say this, Jen, for sure. I've been involved in a lot of conversations offline and online with other property management companies already, and man, they are taking it. They understand that maybe their culture before was the poster. Yes, we promote equality, but now there has to be action. There has to be action from that fair housing standpoint, from the equality within their organization, from a hiring standpoint, all the points that you referenced there. So fantastic. So that leads me to, and I was looking at one of the visuals. Maybe we need to definitely pop this up on the for everyone to see: equality versus equity. I love it. So as we get into, all right, here's the stats. Here's the scope of work. What do we do? Like, what's the people listening to this show? If you were to summarize, how can we apply and take advantage of this information? What do you think? What would you say?
Well, I love that you're referencing this visual of equality versus equity, because this was really helpful to me. One of my coworkers, Tiffany Tamminen, shared this visual with me a while ago, And it really helped me get a better grasp of what is it that we're dealing with. And this could be whether fair housing issues, or this could be within the workplace. And there's these three pictures, and it's showing these three individuals. They all have the same goal. Their goal is to see the game. That is what their task is. And they're all given the exact same tools in order to view the game, and they're all faced with the exact same barrier. Well, the tools that they're given are on the far left-hand side. They've all been given the same tools, but their ability to complete the task is hampered in different ways, just based on their height of these three individuals. So but that's equality. They've all been given the same tools, but for different reasons, they're still not able to accomplish the task in the same way. So now we look at the middle picture. And so they've each been given resources according to their need so that they can still accomplish the task. So now they can equally achieve the task, but they need different tools and resources in order to achieve it. Then we get to the far right-hand side, and this is equity. This is where the barrier itself has been changed, has been moved, so that the added tools and resources are no longer necessary. They can still achieve the task because the original barrier itself has been removed or changed. And so that, to me, I think is really a critical part of this conversation, of understanding that equity, even more so than equality, should be the stretch goal. And we know it's going to take time to get there. But when we can truly ensure that every single member of our team has the equal access to accomplish their task, that would be the ideal goal. Until then, we need to make sure that we are providing the opportunities, the support, the resources, so that every single team member can accomplish the task at hand, whether it's their job or whether it's their personal development goals. Those are the things that we need to ensure are happening, because the number one, the data point that has to do with how employees perceive that they are being treated. We asked the question, are employees treated equally? And what was really surprising to me is that only 2/3 agree that employees are treated equally. We had about 19% who were not willing to commit to agreeing or disagreeing, which to me is very telling. If they're not willing to say, this is how I feel, that concerns me. But then we had an additional nearly 15% who disagreed, who just flat out disagreed that employees are treated equally. So if we have a significant percentage of the workforce, nearly 1/3, saying that they either aren't sure or they disagree that employees are treated equally, that makes it really difficult to ensure that our employees, who themselves might not be feeling fairly treated,
Right.
and we're expecting them to go out and treat the customers in a fair and equitable manner, that's a challenge. That's a real challenge every day. So it has to be more. And I know that you've talked about this. It has to be more than checking a box. And it's the same for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Just because you say that you're focused on it as an organization, you have to do more. There has to be some action behind it, some tangible movement, things that employees can point to and say, yes, this is an organization that is committed to diversity and equity and inclusion. And it's part of our culture, and it's part of how we do business, because it's just who we are. So until you can say that with confidence, there's still a lot of work to be done. But I am very optimistic, because I've seen so many more conversations take place. I've seen it become something of great importance. And even through the course of a year where so many things have been crazy and chaotic and unpredictable, and you've had to change everything, the companies are still saying that this is critical enough, this is important enough that on top of everything else that we've just got to manage and handle, we're going to be focusing attention on this area. And I am really excited about that part of the heart of our industry. Is it is a people focused business,
Right.
and I think that we will continue to see that shown through these initiatives that are coming through more often.
Yeah. Amazing, Jen. Amazing. Oh my goodness, this is fantastic. It's like between the stats and that visual, and that's what I was like, okay, where do we start? And there's some great easy stepping points where to begin. But I think that visual really was the pinnacle to me. Like, where are the barriers? If we can identify the barriers to that goal, that's a good start. And yes, to your point, the conversations are out there. The conversations have to happen beyond just that corporate boardroom. Get your team involved. Let them speak. Let them share. Let them feel involved. A lot that can be done. And with that focus and that goal, again, we're talking about fair housing as it relates to equity, inclusion, and diversity. They all work together. So thank you so much for being available for our show today, for episode 26, for sharing those insights and stats. And I think you've really provided our audience with an incredible amount of information to move forward with. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
So how can people connect with you? You want to let us know how people can connect with you, Swift Bunny? They would like to know more about what you guys do.
Absolutely. We would love to share more data about employee engagement, retention, how to reduce turnover. And you can find us at swiftbunny.com. And you can contact me at jen@swiftbunny.com. And we would love to help you engage more completely with your employees and set them up for success.
Beautiful. Awesome. Awesome. Yes. So do that, everyone. So thank you for being here. Please give us that thumbs up if you enjoyed this episode. Share it with your network. Share it with your fellow colleagues. Use this as a training tool. Use this show as a basis to get this conversation going. We really appreciate your support of the Fair Housing Institute and this show, the Fair Housing Insiders. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We'll see you on our next show. Take care, everyone.